Hello, my dear class. Good morning. How are you all? Class, today we will study about kinetic particle theory. And today's lesson will be the foundation for you to understand, to compare, and to differentiate the different states of matter. And particularly in today's lesson, we are going to learn about the different states of matter. Okay, the objectives of this lesson are understanding what kinetic particle theory is and what are the characteristic properties of different states of matter, and we will be discussing three states of matter today because we are just covering the text or the curriculum. Only three states are there, and we also be trying to cover the reasoning questions, and I will help you that if you know some fact, if you know some logic, then how to pen it down, how to use your pen to reflect your understanding. Okay, so here we begin with the name of God. The topic is kinetic molecular theory of matter. When we see the title of this theory, that is having three terms, needs to be understood: kinetic, matter, and the third term is particle. When we study about matter, we study about sciences, and the study of matter is called as science, and chemistry is the pure science which investigates the matter in detail. Then we see particles. Chemistry defines the composition of matter by means of atoms, molecules, or maybe ions. Ions are basically the charged particles. So you have to come across with these terms many times. So when we see the kinetic means in motion, related to movement. So we have to make a blend of these three different thoughts together. I know my students know well about the matter. That matter is made up of particles. So this is very obvious to you that matter is made up of particles that can be atoms, molecules, or ions that are constantly moving. So it must be something in relation to this word kinetic. The second very important postulate: all particles means particles of solid, particles of liquid, or particles of gas have energy. So this is the main reason, but the energy varies depending on the temperature, means the conditions in which the sample is studied. This in turn determines whether the substance exists in the solid, liquid, or gaseous state. So this slide is just enabling you to understand that matter exists in solid state, or either liquid state, or either gaseous state, just depending on the conditions, and the main condition is temperature. Okay, so the particles are in different physical states just dependent on the conditions, and no matter what state they are in, means they are either in solid or liquid or gaseous state, the particle remains the same. Okay, now we'll talk about each physical state one by one, just to get command on these points. So I have selected these points to discuss one by one. So first we see it is a gas state. The gas state means the invisible state of matter. we all know that many gases are around us, and the gas we are breathing in, that is oxygen, and the gas which is the product of metabolism and that we are excreting it, exhaling out, that's carbon dioxide. So these gases are invisible, but when you blow and you put your hand in front of your mouth, when you blow it hard, you will be feeling something is striking with the palm. So that's the matter, but the gas state is invisible. But sometimes we are lucky to see these gases because they are colored, but it's not every time. So we'll talk about the shape of gas. The gas, or in the gaseous state, the particles, you see this diagram is telling you that particles are very far apart. One atom is here, the other particle is very far, then the distance is very large. So the particles are at distance, and when we see the volume is infinite. It's how you keep the gas. Like if you keep the gas in a balloon, then it will be fixed in this volume. And if you effuse the gas outside, the particles will spread to the space which is provided. So the gases have no definite shape and no fixed volume, just because they are very far apart. And when we talk about the density, as very few particles are present, so the density of the gases is very low as compared to other physical states of matter. So let's talk about the kinetic energy or the movement of particles. Do you remember the Brownian motion in which the particles move here and there, then here, then there? They are in constant motion, and the new direction is independent of the previous track, what is followed by that atom. So these particles are very far apart and they are moving just here and there, and the energy is very high because they are free to move. So the kinetic energy, or the energy of the particles, is very high, and due to this high energy, high kinetic energy, the movement is just free. And the very interesting fact that, can these particles come closer? Suppose it is a cylinder in which the gas is kept. It's a fixed volume, right? It's a metallic cylinder. The particles are just in Brownian motion, moving here and there. And when we apply external pressure, what happens? The particles are squeezed and they come closer. As the particles come closer, we say the gas is compressed, as you compress the sponge in your hand. So the particles can come closer means the gas is compressible. And how it is compressed? The particles come closer and they occupy a lesser volume. Suppose by applying more pressure, the particles can be squeezed. They come closer, and so that the volume is decreased, and we say that the particles are compressed. Something very important to the binding forces. What kind of forces? You know, the atoms are neutral ball of matter, but they are having so many interbinding forces, and you will be studying about these binding forces, which are called as intermolecular forces. So the forces which are binding these atoms together are very, very weak because they are very far apart. So the binding forces or the intermolecular forces in the gaseous state are very weak. They cannot fix the particles over a definite shape. Now, understanding enough about gaseous state, now we will study the important points about the liquid state. As you see, this time many more particles are present in the diagram. So you see the particles of a liquid are relatively closer as compared to the particles of the gas. So that is why the shape and volume of the liquid is fixed. Now, how we can explain this according to kinetic particle theory? According to kinetic particle theory, the particles of a liquid are arranged in a disorderly manner. Means they are arranged but not in form of layers. They are just disorderly arranged, and they are having weak forces of attraction, so that the particles are not fixed to their positions. They are still can be flowing here and there. That's why the liquids are also called as fluids. Why? Because they can flow. The thing which can flow is called as a fluid. You see, the particles are relatively closer, but they are not fixed in the form of layers. They can move here and there, and they can slide over one another. That's why the liquids have fluidity, and they can move freely throughout the liquid. So the particles on the top can go here, the particles in the middle can go here. So this is what they are free to move in the liquid bulk. That is why the liquid has no fixed shape, but the volume is fixed because the number of particles remains the same, constant. When we talk about the density, density means how much mass is present in unit volume. So you see, when we compare the density of liquid with the density of the gas state, we find so many particles are there. So the density of liquids are higher as compared to the density of gases. And we had talked about the kinetic energy of the particles, because their particles are moving all together. They have greater kinetic energy as compared to the solid state, but is still lesser than the gaseous state because they cannot be escaped. Okay, when we talk about the compressibility, the particles of a solid are further away from one another than the particles of the solid. However, the liquid particles are still packed quite closely together. That's why when we apply external pressure, the particles cannot come further closer. So the liquids are incompressible, means we cannot compress a liquid because their particles are free to move but relatively closer. When we talk about the forces of attraction, the forces means the intermolecular forces. The intermolecular forces are the binding forces, means this particle has force on this particle has force on all the surrounding particles. So it is equally attracted by all directions. So the binding forces are more than the binding forces of the gases. Okay, now we talk about the solid state particularly. You see, the diagram is enough to explain you that I can see the particles having orderly fixed arrangement. Like this is how the particles are fixed. They have an orderly motion, orderly position. They are fixed. That's why they have a definite shape, and that is the same reason they have got a definite volume, because they are not changing, they are not moving from their positions. And you see the many particles, so many particles are just tightly packed together. That's why solids have a very high density. Yes, that's the main reason. And when we talk about the energy, kinetic energy on motion of the particles, look, if I just observe the movement of this particle, it can slightly go, or just it can move slightly. In physics we say it's moving to its mean position. It's just vibrating, remaining fixed, but it's just vibrating to right and left. So these particles are in motion, but their kinetic energy is very low, so that they can only vibrate about their mean position. They cannot leave their place, like as the particles of the liquid can move in the whole body of the liquid. These particles cannot move, and when we see the arrangement, we find no empty spaces between the atoms. So the solids are not compressible. That's why, because they have fixed shape, fixed volume, and the density is very high, and the particles having fixed position. So the solid state is not compressible. And what about the forces of attraction? The forces of attraction are the maximum among all the physical states, because you see this particle is very tightly packed due to very strong force of attraction of the all neighboring atoms. So the particle is equally and very strongly attracted by its neighboring particles. So each particle is experiencing a very strong, or you say the strongest force of attraction. Now today's assignment is a bit lengthy because I have given you few questions which are oftenly asked in the examination, and when you understand the topic well in detail, you must be creative enough to use the proper words and appropriate words to share your logic or your reason. So you have to give me answers in writing of these questions through sending the pictures or whatever way you adopt. I will be waiting for the answers. You can take help from your textbook, but believe me, you will not be writing the answer or the reason for these questions in more than 2 lines or 3 lines. So I just want the fixed word or the appropriate word in your answer. I'm leaving you with the hope that this distant teaching and learning is an effective way. I'm trying to make a better video than the previous ones, just to facilitate you and to deliver you the real chemistry, real happy understanding chemistry. Okay class, take care and wait for my next lesson. God bless you. Allah Hafiz.